Operations Lead at Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited. We appreciate all of you attending and listening to today's press conference, especially at such short notice. We take this opportunity to express once again our deepest sympathy to the families, co-workers, and friends of the missing divers. We understand and recognize this is a very difficult and emotional time for you and all. Parias personnel, in collaboration with LMCS and other key stakeholders, have focused on reaching the missing divers day and night since the incident occurred. Today, we are here to provide an update and information on the operations that transpired since and the next steps. We have with us today, from my left, Mr. Mushtaq Mohammed, the General Manager, Chairman, Mr. Newman George, and Terminal Operations Manager and Incident Commander, Mr. Colin Piper. I would now like to invite our Chairman, Mr. Newman George, to provide a current update.
Thank you, Narissa. Good evening to the media and to the listening and viewing public. A joint meeting with LMCS Limited, Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, as well as independent subject matter experts, today agreed on a way forward with respect to the location and recovery of the 4 divers who have been trapped in the 30-inch pipeline. Based on advice from all the experts, the operation has now moved from rescue to recovery. The experts have also agreed on a joint effort which will see a water displacement process being used to gradually push the bodies along the 400-meter pipeline to where they can successfully be recovered at berth 6. The procedure to achieve this is currently being designed by Parias' engineering team, with the aim being to ensure an uninterrupted movement of the bodies along the pipeline to the point of recovery. This decision was arrived at after lengthy deliberations with the leadership of LMCS, Paria, Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, and 2 independent dive experts. As chairman of the board of Paria, I would like to extend my condolences to the families of Mr. Rishi Nagasa, Mr. Faisal Kuban, Mr. Yusuf Henry, and Mr. Kazim Ali Jr., who is the son of Mr. Kazim Ali, Managing Director of LMCS, on the loss of their loved ones. I would also like to thank all the members of staff of Paria and all the other stakeholders for their unending commitment and support in these ongoing efforts. At this stage, I would like to hand over to the General Manager of Paria, Mr. Mushtaq Mohammed, and Mr. Colin Piper, Terminal Manager, who will provide the technical details of the operations to be undertaken. Thank you.
Good evening to the media and listening public. My name is Colin Piper. I'm the current Terminal Operations Manager at Paria and the Incident Commander for the response to this incident. So on Friday, February 25th, around 2:30 p.m., an incident occurred at Parias offshore installation. It was reported that 5 divers from the contractor LMCS were missing. Paria immediately activated its incident command, mobilizing mobilizing rescue operations, including Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, Trinidad and Tobago Fire Services, commercial diving experts, contractors with technical support equipment for investigative works towards rescue of personnel. At the time of the incident, the contractor, LMCS, was working on a 30-inch diameter pipeline, submarine pipeline. The efforts are still ongoing. I would like to express condolences to the families of Mr. Faisal Kurban, Mr. Rishi Nagasa, Mr. Yusuf Henry, Mr. Kazem Ali Jr. I would like to hand you over now to Parias General Manager, Mr. Mushtaq Mohammed.
Good evening to the press and the viewing public. Following on from what Colin just described, Paria is currently moving from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. And this is based on the available expert advice from the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard and a number of commercial diving experts that were consulted. It was determined that we now have an intolerable risk to send divers down into the pipeline to attempt rescue operations without first determining the conditions in the pipeline. Over the period since the incident began, a number of technologies were used, including cameras and underwater crawlers, to determine the pipeline and the conditions within it. When this information was collected, gathered, and analyzed using our experts and the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, it was determined that based on all the information we had, the probability of survival was very low, and the risk of rescue was high or intolerable. This decision was not an easy decision, and it was made in consultation with all our stakeholders, the incident management team, including our contractor, LMCS, the Coast Guard's diving experts, engineering experts, and Parias engineering team. The decision was made after careful consideration to two key factors. Number one being the extremely low likelihood of survival, and number two being the risk of placing human life in danger in furtherance of a rescue objective. Our focus now is to treat these bodies with respect during the process of recovery and to return them to their loved ones. We also are paying particular emphasis on not placing any persons in harm's way during these operations. I too want to express my deepest condolences with all the families and loved ones of these persons, and to commit to them that we remain resolute in the principle of the recovery operations. This is the update we have as of this time this afternoon, and we are willing to take questions from the media to find if there's any further details.
Hello, good night, everyone. My name is Cindy Raghubati Singh, TP6. When was it determined that this would now be a recovery mission and not one of rescue? When was that determined?
That decision was made this afternoon in conjunction with our contractors, with our experts from the commercial diving fraternity, and with the input of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard.
Mr. Mohammed, what I mean is, when was it determined that the men were no longer alive and you all could not go into rescue and instead go in to recover bodies?
We can't answer the question of when it was determined whether the man was alive. What we are saying is that at this time, based on all the advice we have gotten, the likelihood of survival is extremely low, and the risk of human rescue into the pipeline is extremely high.
There is a country outraged tonight. 3 days later, you all are coming with this press conference. Why wasn't something done sooner when there were relatives who went in within an hour or two to save one of the men, and nothing done since that to possibly go in? Even relatives have been saying that they've been volunteering. Why hasn't there been a mission out there outside of that?
Cindy, as we said earlier, the issue that we have been trying to understand and work around is understand the condition within the pipeline before placing any further person in danger by entering into that pipeline. During the time, we have spent and used various technologies to get into that pipeline to understand and determine what were the conditions, so we could have felt that it was safe enough to put another person in harm's way in a rescue situation. Gathering all that data and having discussions with the best experts we have in country, including the Coast Guard, it was determined that that risk of sending divers into that pipeline was intolerable.
What are these conditions that it would have taken 3 days to determine? What are the conditions inside there that would have taken experts in a country like this to determine?
You want to go, Colin?
Yes, good evening. Yes. So, at the start of the incident, we consulted with the Coast Guard, and they assessed the situation and determined that they weren't able to enter the pipeline because they didn't have sufficient information. We used cameras which we inserted into the pipeline to try to gather information as best as we could. We also spoke with Mr. Budram, who provided additional information. We discussed with the Coast Guard, and we discussed with commercial diving experts who were mobilized on site with this additional information, including video footage. And they still, after consultation, they still advised that the risk was too intolerable for their divers to enter the pipeline, and they indicated that survivability was very, very slim.
Is there any concrete evidence that has come forward which suggests that the persons in the pipeline are deceased, separate and apart from the advice that you would have received?
We have no concrete evidence to make that conclusion at this time.
Okay. And do you have a time frame with respect to how long would you all be recovering, or how long the bodies would be recovered?
That's a good question, and we thought about that several times. And although we want to make that recovery process as quick as possible, our focus is more around the method that we use, ensuring that as we recover these bodies, we recover them in a way where we treat them with respect, we recover them carefully, and we're able to deliver them to their families. So time is relevant, but the way and the respect we treat with this recovery operation is more important to us at this time.
All right, so could you tell us now what recovery operation is actually taking place at the moment? Because we are getting information that things have been stalled, they are waiting on, there have been issues with permits being granted, etc. Could you just explain that first, please?
All right. All activities must be done, are done in Paria. We risk assess, we have process and safety guidelines. While we have an incident and we need to move very quickly, we have to be very careful that we do not endanger, put other persons at risk and put the situation at further compromise. We have with the experts, with our team, technical teams, we have to work together to put the plans in place. We have started activities in preparation for recovery, and we expect that to be soon.
Like, excuse me if I'm a bit repetitive. You all have an idea of where the men might be? You all have any idea of where the men might be? Yeah, where are they? Like, where would they be? You said you've sent cameras on these type of things.
Yes.
How do you know you're looking in the right locations?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you clearly.
Good night again. Okay. And just excuse me if I'm a bit repetitive. You said you send cameras and use different methods to locate the men. You'll have an idea of where they are. Now, you'll have sent in cameras in the pipeline. Are we sure that they're inside there? What is guiding your search location?
Right. So we did attempt, and we sent in a borescope, we sent in a crawler to gather information. At that time, with best efforts, we weren't able to actually see the men. We were not able to go more than 100, 150 feet into the pipeline. This pipeline is approximately 1,200 feet long, and it was difficult. Up to this time, we weren't able to determine exactly where along the pipeline the men are.
So are we sure they're in the pipeline?
Based on discussions with Mr. Christopher Boudram, he indicated that the men are in the pipeline.
Right. And so now you're focusing on recovery. What exactly is the method of recovery? What exactly are you planning to do next? And when do you plan to start those new methods of recovery?
The method for recovery is a water displacement process where we are going to use pumps to pump liquids water into the pipeline at predetermined pumping rates to ensure there is an easy and smooth removal of fluids. We call it a liquid displacement process, where we are going to displace that liquid at a rate to be able to move those bodies very slowly to the point where they could be recovered. Very slowly, very carefully, very respectfully to the point where they could be recovered.
So it's sort of like washing out the pipe.
Water displacement,
Yeah.
I want the words to be very carefully repeated.
Yeah, but put it in layman terms so the average reader.
A water displacement, liquid water displacement method that will be properly managed, calculated using good engineering detail to be able to move those bodies very carefully and respectfully to where they can be recovered. And I want to be very specific about it.
I have
When will this begin?
This operation is ongoing as we speak, and as I mentioned before, the respect and care for the recovery at this time is more important to us than time.
There have been complaints from family members of the persons within the pipeline that they are not, Paria has not been communicating properly, effectively with them and giving them updates as to what actually is taking place.
Well, that is not entirely true, because we have been, in fact, we formed a WhatsApp group with the family members, and we have been contacting them through that system.
Has the company provided any support for the family members? Because we know they have been camping out since Friday at the car park. The OWTU said that they were the ones providing stuff for them. What has the company been doing?
We met with the families on Saturday. We met with the families on Saturday with the minister, and our offer was to provide counseling services to the families to help them through what we believe and we know to be a very tough period.
And my final question, have you all, the information you all communicated with us here tonight with respect to the situation being moved from a search and rescue operation to a recovery operation, have you all communicated that with the family members before you all spoke with us here tonight?
Yes, and that was a decision that was unilaterally made between LMCS, the contractors, and the families. We didn't just come up with that. We had a meeting with them today, and that was unilaterally decided.
Okay.
For the benefit of the cameras and those viewing tonight, I know you all issued a statement late this evening. Can you tell the population what you all determined would have led to Friday's incident?
We are currently, so that question will be answered at the outcome of the investigation. We are in the process of putting an investigation team together for us to be able to answer those questions through good research and analysis.
All right. So, Mr. Mohammed, I'll just tell you, in the press release Paria issued, you all said that via a witness statement from Mr. Bujram that the divers fell in. In an interview with the Express, he said that that's not the case. And what they've been saying from the start, that they were sucked in, is what would have taken place. Can you just explain that, please?
Cindy, the facts around that remain unclear today. And our focus over the last 3 days has been around rescue, and we have converted that to recovery. And we will be able to provide those answers when we have the incident fully investigated.
So an incident on this kind of scale, does Paria accept liability for what would have taken place?
That's not for discussion at the conference, at this press conference stands.
Do you all believe that there was some level of negligence on the part of any party, and who do you all think that that falls on?
Cindy, again, the incident will be fully investigated, and those facts and those decisions will be made at the end of the investigation.
So you all can't say at this time if the bodies were sucked in and not fell in as stated in your press release?
I can't say that and be conclusive about a statement until the investigation is completed.
But do you all believe that the incident was as a result of negligence? Something went wrong somewhere?
We are not certain about that at all,
Yeah.
Cindy. We are not certain.
Is the investigation?
The investigation will determine that.
So you're not certain, is it?
No, we are not certain. The investigation will determine that.
Who are the parties investigating?
Pardon?
Who are the parties investigating?
The parties for the investigation is currently being determined. As soon as that party is determined, we will make an announcement saying who the investigation team is, who are the members of the investigation team.
Based on the final, based on the last, some of the contents in the last statement Paria would have issued, it appears there may be a preliminary report on this incident. Did you all receive a preliminary report as the board? Members of the board?
No,
We don't have any preliminary report. Nothing of the sort.
So no sort of
It was
investigation has started?
Sorry?
No sort of investigation has started into this incident?
Yes, a soft investigation has started, but no report has been produced.
So who is currently investigating? Who is currently investigating?
The investigations at this time is completely internal, but it's not the official investigation that will have to take place for an incident of this nature.
Is it expected that the contents of this report at the end of the investigation is going to be made public, given the sensitivity of the matter and the sort of publicity has...
When we set up that final investigative team, their report will be made public, not our personal, what you might say, our internal... unqualified.
Is there any time frame with respect to this investigation, how long it's expected to take?
But we want to retrieve the bodies first. We want to go through that process, which we intend to start very early in the morning. Yes, how long it will take, we are not certain. So once we get through that hurdle, we will move to the next process. But in the meantime, what we are trying to do is to establish that investigative team.
Is it that the men were doing the work inside the pipeline? When they were doing the work, was it that they were doing it inside the pipeline?
No, they were not working inside the pipeline. They were working outside of the pipeline, on the outside.
And lastly for me, you all have any update on the medical condition of the survivor? How is he doing?
Yes, Mr. Budram, our last update is he is at the San Fernando General. He's at hospital. Yes, he's at hospital, and he is stable, and he is doing well. That's our last update.
Is it being considered at this time to, I know you all mentioned a WhatsApp group with your relatives, but the relatives are saying they aren't getting the information as quickly as they'd like, and they've been in this shed for 3 days. Do you all not think that maybe a room would be better or some way to accommodate the residents? Can maybe 1 or 2 be a little bit closer to where the search is taking place?
I didn't quite get your question.
Cindy, there are 2 things happening at Paria today. One is we have an ongoing operation where we are providing fuel for the country and our regional customers. And we store a huge inventory of hydrocarbons. And typically, with that type of operation, there is always the risk of accident or incident, and minimizing people on the site is something that is always done. Our objective was to provide communications to the families. However, bringing more and more people on the site at this time just increases risk to Paria operations.
And just finally, for the confusion that people may have in incidents that, might have taken place in other countries across the globe, do you all think maybe it's too little, too late, 3 days in this effort? Or is that standard, you would say, in this type of industry, in an incident that might be similar? Is it too little, too late? And did you all think that you have responded much longer than relatives and the country would have liked?
Cindy, and I'd add and I'd ask Colin to continue this answer. Our response was immediate, and our response brought to bear on this incident all the resources that we could have gathered locally, including some of the best dive companies, the best dive experts, the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, and our own facilities were brought to bear on this incident with almost immediately. So we responded to the full capability of the country within a very short time of the incident being reported. Colin, you want to add to that?
Yes, and every decision we had to make very carefully, and not to further endanger life or limb. So we had to be very calculated in every decision, consultation with the experts at every point and every move.
Just one last thing. Are there any prevention measures to avoid what took place, that suction into the pipe, and was it in place?
Yeah. So all activities that we carry out at Paria We have our method statements, we risk assess, we look at process situations, process activities, all activities that are carried out. I'm sure with the investigation, we will wait for the report. I'm sure there will be recommendations.
Some experts have said that backup emergency divers are usually on jobs like this. Can you say if there were divers nearby, ready and waiting in the event of an emergency, like what would have taken place on Friday, and why didn't they respond?
Yeah. Yes, there was an emergency diver present, and yes, he did respond.
I have one final question. I know you had mentioned earlier on that you have offered support to the family members. Could you tell us what type of support has been offered and accepted at this point in time? Yeah, could you tell us what type of support has been offered by Paria to the family members at this point in time and what has been accepted?
Hold on. Your mic is off.
Sorry. What was offered by Paria as support to the family, we think what was most critical at that point in time was the counseling services necessary to help people through what was highly emotional and sensitive time. And we did make that offer to the families when we saw them personally.
Has that counseling process started?
Not yet.
Mr. Piper,
Yes, it has started. And we'll have to contact the families. It's a very personal thing for whether families want consulting services or not, but it is available and the families know where to find it.
Mr. Piper, the emergency diver that you said was on standby and did respond. Can you tell me how he responded? Because we heard that it was a relative that saved the lone survivor. So just can you explain how that lone...
We would prefer to wait for the investigation, let the investigation be conducted, and all should be revealed.
So the recovery starts tonight?
It has started, but the official pressurizing and movement of that water starts tomorrow morning, very early in the morning.
More questions? We'll just take 2 more. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our media briefing. I'd just like to reiterate 3 key points. Paria has moved into a recovery operation